the limitations of projection based pixelation distortion, VR's misalignment, and the technology is improving, and I do believe it'll get there at some point.
Yeah,
And
right.
maybe more realistically with AR or reality based training. But how is
Right.
your company dealing with these limitations for marksmanship training in a
Okay. Well,
simulated
those are,
environment?
I need, if you've read what I blog, snarkily on LinkedIn, those are really good questions because let's talk about, and the short answer is a scope. And I'll explain the difference between the two profoundly is whether or not you use iron sights. I mean, I'm talking about military, not clay shooting. Is whether or not you use an optic or iron sights. And here's why. If you use an optic, if and I'm kind of assuming we're using an optic,
Right.
either a reflex sight or an ACOG or I know I keep doing these, this product placement for Trigicon, but the reason why is if you force the simulation, to look at the reflex or the ACOG, a magnified scope, then a whole bunch of things sort of go issues, if you will, that you brought up kind of go bye bye. One of them is you're not really worrying about the discrepancy on what that VR simulated M4 looks differs from your Coyote tan, real life M4 because you're not looking at it. You're just looking at that scope. And so your sight picture, your world is constrained to that scope or that reflex even. So that eliminates, that sort of makes not irrelevant, but mitigates any issues of the disconnect between the real world and your VR of the VR gun and your
Right.
and your real on what matters.
Hmm.
But that gets to the other point about the 2D. The problem with 2D is, and remind you that I got two 2D patents and we have built 2D simulators for clay shooting. And the reason why we didn't for military is because it has two fundamental problems. One of them is as soon as you put a telescopic scope on a rifle, by the way, 2D works great. Like, Gunfighter Jim works great for short distances, iron sights, shoot, no shoot, kill terrorists, don't shoot hostage, etc. Great. God bless you. But if you think, but the gap at the defined gap for the Marines is 50 meters to 300 meters. It's five on moving targets, meaning where they need to focus on learning. It's 500 meters at the range. So that means you're going to use a scope. You're going to use an optic. You're going to use a scope. As soon as you use a scope in a 2D simulation, then Mr. Shooter, you've got to move back away from the screen, or the scope will be out of focus. So now, and the other thing is when you've moved away, and given the size of the screen, if it's a realistic size, the pixel density on that screen, even with 4K, even with the best commercial grade projectors, is going to be a fraction of the pixel density that you would have in a Vario or an HTC Vive headset with foveated eye tracking that's sticking all the friggin' pixels right there at where you're looking at through the scope. So, so in other words, the clarity of the image in VR is going to be, much better than what it is in 2D.